Good evening. Welcome everyone to this evening's webinar. Um, Tonight we have author Julie Wilcox, author of The WinWin Diet, How to Be Plant-Based and Still Eat What You Love. And she will be interviewed by Cristina Cuomo, editor-in-chief of Purist magazine. And without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Cristina Cuomo and Julie Wilcox.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, East Hampton Library, for having me. I am thrilled to be interviewing fellow New Yorker, Julie Wilcox, renowned wellness consultant and author of the new book, The WinWin Diet, which just came out last month. A little bit about Julie. She is the founder of Julie Wilcox Wellness and co-founder of Ishta Yoga. She's had 2 decades of experience as a wellness consultant, a writer, a teacher, and a coach. She has national certifications in yoga and fitness and a master's of science in nutrition and dietetics from New York University, and she earned her AB, not BA, AB, in English and American literature at Harvard. Her perspective on self-discipline and mindfulness was strongly shaped by her childhood experience as a gymnast, which is fascinating. We got a chance to talk about that yesterday, along with her extensive study of yoga and nutrition as an adult. You can also learn more about Julie on her website, juliewilcoxwellness.com. So, a bit about her new WinWin Diet book. So the WinWin Diet, it's called How to Be Plant-Based and Still Eat What You Love. So the popularity of plant-based diets is on the rise, with as many as 5% of Americans identifying as vegetarian, according to a Gallup poll. In her new book, Julie provides clear-cut answers to a broad range of questions for those curious about a plant-based diet. She offers expert insight into how a plant-based diet can be achievable, flexible, sustainable, and tasty. She also provides a comprehensive guide to transitioning to one of 4 popular eating patterns. I loved learning about the flexitarian diet, which I think that's where I land, pescatarian, vegetarian, and vegan diets or lifestyles. The bottom line, a plant-based diet can be maintained without cutting out entire food groups, including meat, dairy, and eggs. So now we're going to go right into the book and learn all that we can in this hour from Julie. So Julie, it's so nice to talk with you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, first of all. And thank you to the East Hampton Library for having us here.
So there seems to be a lot of confusion surrounding the notion of what is a plant-based diet. Would you give us a clear definition?
Yes, a plant-based diet is a diet that simply increases consumption of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, and plant-based proteins, while reducing consumption of animal-sourced products and processed food. So it's not about entire elimination of animal-sourced products, as many tend to believe that you have to go vegan in order to be plant-based. And that's really what this book is about and why I wrote it.
We're going to dig deep into that. But first, what are some of the health benefits of adopting a plant-based eating pattern?
There are so many, including enhanced energy, better sleep, stronger immunity, enhanced mental focus and clarity, of course, treatment and prevention, management of so many chronic diseases, from cardiovascular disease to type 2 diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, depression, pretty much any chronic illness that's out there. Plant-based eating can really help to alleviate in some way or another.
And how can adhering to a plant-based diet contribute to this positive state of mind?
I mean, it makes you feel great overall. I mean, it fuels you with the the nutrients and, the vitamins, the minerals, all the macronutrients that you need, the phytochemicals and the antioxidants, which fight all the toxins that enter our body, and the cellular damage that occurs as a result. So it really is the source of our well-being. There's nothing more important than the food that we consume to overall well-being, happiness, vitality. I mean, kind of hits every front. So
It certainly does. And there's so much discussion now about gut brain connectivity. And I think that over 70% of neurotransmitters are formed in the gut. So, that expression, you are what you eat, really applies here. But your mood can be dictated by what you eat based on what's going on in your gut. So, you talk about these different these four variations of eating in the book. What inspired you to write the WinWin Diet?
as you touched upon in your introduction, I have had a lifelong experience in health and wellness, starting as a very serious athlete, a gymnast training under Russian coaches. And so diet was very important to me from an early age. And it required a lot of discipline to adhere to a diet that could fuel the level of athletic performance that was demanded, which was 4-hour training practices, daily competitions on the weekend. Whether it was physical endurance or mental endurance, you needed to be eating the right foods. At the same time, of course, as we know, athletes have weight checks and need to be
Yeah.
very lean in order to perform at their best. So
What
that
was
was
your body fat at that point? Probably like 4%.
it was well, actually, it was 12%, which is very low for women. Women on average are about 17%. Um, so it was a
Amazing.
constant challenge to try to keep it there. And you're lined up against your teammates, and the coaches look at everybody up against one another, and it's a little stressful. But what I was able to take away that was positive from that experience was a healthy amount of discipline, and structure, and understanding that it's important to have a framework within which to work. So later in life, when I became a yoga teacher and studio owner, and I learned to embrace mindfulness and balance, I was able to blend those with the discipline and the structure to find a much more pleasant and content place, in and around towards food. And finally, when I went back to school, I learned about all the science and the importance of personalization. So that was the last ingredient that sort of went into developing my approach. And I wrote the book because I really wanted to amalgamate all of these principles and life experiences into a friendly guide that's achievable, and flexible, as you mentioned, so that the concept of plant-based eating could really reach the masses, which I don't believe it has yet.
Yeah, I find that athletes always have an advantage over the layman because they want to maintain that level of bodily excellence. And you figure out very early on that food is medicine and the way to achieve that. So, why do you describe a plant based diet as win win?
A plant-based diet can be absolutely delicious, as you all will learn and see and experience from my recipes. And of course, it has that laundry list of health benefits we talked about, but at the same time, you do not have to sacrifice the foods you love. And you're also helping the environment and animal welfare.
So, would you give us a brief overview of the four variations I mentioned earlier of this plant based diet?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, they all focus on increasing consumption of fruits and vegetables and all the other plant food groups, which I want to emphasize because it is as important that you increase all those as you do decrease anything at all. But the flexitarian diet really focuses on reducing meat consumption, or making decisions about choosing higher quality products. That can apply to dairy and eggs as well. The pescatarian eating pattern is for people who don't want to eat meat anymore, but still do want to eat fish, dairy, and eggs. The vegetarian is for those who only want to eat dairy and or eggs. And the vegan is for people that are not interested in animal products at all anymore.
So you stress in the book, a plant-based diet doesn't have to mean giving up meat. Okay, so for meat lovers, could you offer some tips on environmentally conscious choices, the types of farms they should be looking at? You know, farming practices are really important in that consideration as well. And do you have to source your meat locally?
It is best to source your meat locally if possible. And I'd say the top thing to focus on as you're starting is to avoid eating processed meats if possible, and meats that are produced on factory farms. So that's a good place always to begin. Then, of course, if you can choose organic, pasture raised, and grass fed varieties, those are some other steps you can take. If you are ready to forego red meat, you can choose to eat white meat only. So there are so many different ways that you can, chip away and just make some choices that the thing is these small incremental changes all have a huge impact on whether it's your health, the environment, or animal welfare. So, I really want people to understand that it's not about, again, having to go to the extreme. When you eat one extra plant-based meal a day, for instance, you in a year can be saving 200 gallons of water per year. So for animal agriculture, which is the second greatest contributor to greenhouse gases, we use 70% of the water from our watershed. So that's a massive amount. It is responsible also for 80% of forestry burning. And of course, the animals produce a ton of methane gas. So again,
All of which contribute to the global emissions.
of course. And so if you can reduce by one meal a day, you're definitely alleviating that stress and damage. And also studies show that you can reduce your risk of premature death by anywhere from 7 to 19% by eliminating one meat meal a day.
So we're talking about mass market, not like these small, farming practices that are, more healthful if you're maintaining an omnivore lifestyle. In your book, you cite the World Resource Institute, which is an environmental research group, and they recommend that wealthy nations cut their beef, lamb, and dairy consumption by 40% to meet global emissions goals for 2050. And if we apply that same guideline to this notion of personalizing our diets by cutting meat and dairy down by 40%, we can help contribute to that goal. Personalizing one's diet is a big factor in your book. Can you talk a little bit about what that means by to create a personalized approach to eating?
So there are the 4 eating patterns that I cover in the book, but within each of those, as we talked about just now with flexitarian, there is even still range. And so the idea is to really work to find the nuances that make any of the eating patterns right for you. And, in the guide portion of the book, I give an 8-week methodology to transition between any of the eating patterns. And after that, I offer a section on assessment, which incorporates questions. And I ask that the readers do some journal exercises to answer those questions about how they're feeling at any given point during this process of change, to make sure that physically, mentally, and emotionally, because as we know, changes to what we eat affects all those levels of being, to make sure that they're okay and that it's right. And If it is, great, maybe they can continue on if they want to. If not, then maybe you want to go back a little bit, and or maybe you need a little bit more time than the time I've mapped out in the book. So I really offer people that opportunity to evaluate themselves and how they're experiencing these different eating styles to make sure that they are feeling better and comfortable and content. I mean, each one of us is so unique in our makeup and in our health status, and what's right for me is not going to be right for you. You know, someone may be lactose intolerant and just can't have dairy, or someone might have an allergy to a milk protein or eggs, or you know may choose that, may be pregnant, so may choose not to want to touch any raw fish or fish that are high in mercury, for instance. So it depends on your life cycle. It's where you are in the life cycle, and it depends on like what your health status is and where you're trying to get it to.
But do you think it's important to get an analysis of one's blood, for example, to determine what you're allergic to, or perhaps an epigenetics test where you determine what your DNA is, made of, so you know what foods you should and shouldn't be eating?
I do. I do. I definitely encourage people to always check with their physicians and or a registered dietitian if they want. I think it's a combination of what the biological tests show, and then also, of course, how you're feeling. I think how you're feeling is as much a gauge as are the tests, but you don't want to be with one and not the other.
Well, I love how you teach your reader how to be their own best doctor, right? I always say, like, learn as much as you can about your health before you get into a difficult situation. And then you're at a disadvantage. So it's really important to know how our body functions and what our body needs. Um, would you
Right. So if
share?
you're, for instance, just to elaborate on that point, if you're, for instance, deficient in iron, you might need to and want to stay in the flexitarian pattern. That might be you, and you have to do you. Or if you decide to go further, then you will have to likely take a supplement. So yes, you do want to know these things as early as possible.
And when did you know that you were when did you start embracing this plant-based eating?
I was about 14 years old when I first became vegetarian, actually, and I had seen a film in my ninth grade biology class on factory farming, and that turned me off of meat quite a bit. And at the same time, my sister had already started to be vegetarian, so those two things nudged me in the direction of going vegetarian, which I did for about a decade. And then in my 20s, I graduated from college. I felt that I was missing something in my diet. It was somewhat variety. I just felt very limited in my choices, and got kind of tired a lot of eating the same things over and over. And I also just didn't feel my best energetically. So I started to add fish back in, and that worked wonderfully. And I've been pescatarian since.
So for those who don't have the financial advantage of dining out and experiencing a lot of these plant-based restaurants that are now available, especially in New York City, what are your suggestions for um, taking that step into exploring new whole foods, plant-based foods, and also cooking, making that transition into becoming a cook at any age? And when did
Yeah.
that happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, I have been slowly moving towards cooking more and more my entire life. My mother actually went to the Cordon Bleu in France when she was young, so she was always
Wow.
in the kitchen making things. So that was the start, but it was really, during college when I started living on my own for the first time. I had an apartment that had a kitchen. And so I do my own thing there. And then after I graduated and really became a full adult, I had to fend for myself, as we do. And there's only so much that you really do want to go out and take out. I mean, it's fun. I love it. I do it all the time myself, but like, it's a lot, to make that a lifestyle. Um, So I think cooking is super fun. I think attitude is super important, and a lot of people think about it as something arduous and inconvenient and time consuming, and I guess it can be all of those things, but it can also be
Fun.
wonderful and fun, and it can be an experience that you can do with other people and bond, and where you can get creative in the kitchen. And I think for me, that's what really kind of grabbed me and gripped me. I've actually never been able to follow recipes very well myself, so the only way I was really able to learn to cook was to do it myself and to just be creative and come up with my own recipes. And so then to, you know, take it even a step further to make it even more fun and interesting and exploratory, like spices and herbs, using all different vegetables. It's so important to eat the rainbow, as we know. It just became sort of a carnival for me in a way. And that's how it all came. And I suggest that other people, think of it like that, and bring your kids in to enjoy it with you, from the process of the cooking to enjoying the meal together, and just make it a fun activity.
Well, I noticed, like, especially in my family, everybody has a different craving at dinner time. This one wants, pastas and grains, and this one, might, venture into more plant-based green vegetables. Like, it's very challenging to have different age groups represented at the dinner table. But I love how you offer all these recipes in your book. I was not surprised to see tacos and salads with blue cheese and pizza recipes, but also sample meal plans, which I think I'm going to follow and see how it works and try to get everybody on that same page. But you have a lot of egg dishes and things like that, and there are a lot of myths behind eggs and grains and tofu, soy, for example. How would you encourage um, your readers to embrace those ingredients and dispel of those myths against certain food types?
I covered the food groups that I felt were most controversial and people had the most questions about in the first part of the book. So ones you mentioned, such as eggs and soy, and legumes are there as well, dairy, meat, fish, processed food. So I encourage people to definitely read that section, and understand the science, because there are pros and cons to each of these foods. But again, which of those it is
Yeah.
will depend on you and your body and your lifestyle and your preferences and needs. And so there's nothing inherently terrible about any of these foods, other than, I will say, the processed ones, we definitely want to eat in moderation, whether it's packaged food or whether it's, the processed meats and other products. And the same goes, frankly, for the plant-based protein foods. So, yes, tofu, seitan, tempeh, encourage people to experiment with those. They're absolutely delicious. Better to choose the pure varieties and make recipes like the ones in my book, as opposed to going for the Beyond or the Impossible burgers or the other highly processed options out there. And to eat seasonally, to experiment with the different fruits and vegetables, again, so that you get the variety and different flavors, is really important as well.
Yeah, the meatless industry is one of the fastest growing industries, which you mentioned statistics on in the book. So avoiding over processed meatless products is also probably something to consider. And always know your ingredients. I mean, you should be able to count the ingredients in a particular um, uh, food that you're buying on one hand, right? You shouldn't really over exceed that. And I know that a lot of the viewers will have questions today, so I want to finish mine and then get to their burning food questions. Can an individual follow plant-based eating and actually make a significant change to the state of our planet? does it help mitigate our climate crisis?
So I think we covered that a bit, and I believe that it does. You know, with every incremental change that you make, you are doing less destruction, whether it's again on the, if it comes to forestry burning, if it comes to water usage, if it comes to production of greenhouse gases. It does make a difference overall to all of those categories, and of course to animal welfare, which is just as important.
Yeah, and obviously the environment, which you chapter in the book, is a significant reason to want to make that change. And the long term benefits to your health are the reward, right? And then of course, altering the state of our environmental crisis for our future generations, our children. So you touch on another crisis in the book, COVID-19. How might a plant-based diet protect against future pandemics?
The studies that have already been done on COVID-19 and plant-based eating have shown that because our immune systems tend to be much stronger when we eat a plant-based diet, there's a much less chance of acquiring the virus. If you get it, your symptoms typically will be less severe. There's a reduced risk of contagion, of spreading it. And it just doesn't linger in the system as long because we're more fortified against pathogens like that. So it's really helpful. It's amazing that how fast all the research has been, going on with this new virus, but the studies are there, and that's what they show.
So there's a question of safety around a plant-based diet, and let's say for pregnant women or young children and developing teens, are they getting enough protein, and are these diets safe? And is there anything being left out from a plant-based diet?
They definitely can be safe. Again, I encourage people to check with their physicians. Protein is not as much of a problem as people typically think it is. In fact, on average, we get more than double the amount of protein that we need. And even vegetarians get 70% more than is needed. So as long as you are consuming enough calories, you basically will be getting the protein you need. Of course, you want to make sure you're balancing all your nutrients properly. If you are moving towards or in the vegetarian and vegan eating patterns, there definitely are things to watch for and be concerned about. And that would be vitamin B12, vitamin D, maybe iron, omega-3 fatty acids. So if you're kind of nudging towards that end of the spectrum, you definitely want to check in on those. And certainly if you're in these intense growth phases of life, adolescence and pregnancy, for sure, there are different requirements and needs. So it is important to be vigilant.
You are a great advocate of plant-based eating and a proponent of and teacher of yoga. So I want to talk about how the two come together. How do yoga and other mindfulness practices like meditation complement this plant-based lifestyle?
So yoga is really about getting to know yourself really well. We've been talking a lot about that, about personalization. So it can really help that process of kind of going beneath the surface and really understanding what your true needs are. Also just about starting to listen to your intuitive hunger and fullness cues. So rather than eating because it's convenient, it's time, other people are doing it, you're in front of the TV, you're bored, to really start to tune into what your body actually wants and needs, like, and eat for those reasons, as opposed to all these other reasons that we tend to eat for. Yoga is about tuning out distractions, about being present. So just developing healthy habits around meal times, setting up a nice calming and peaceful environment, if that's dim lights or candlelight or nice music, or having your loved ones around so that you can have a pleasant social experience. Also, using your senses while you're eating. So yoga definitely, the process of meditation is about withdrawing your senses because that enables you to pay closer attention to yourself. It's interesting because it's a little bit of the reverse with mindful eating because you actually want your senses to, you want to enhance your senses so that you can really, the that's how you become present in and around food as opposed to with yoga it's through withdrawal. But so rather than diving into your plate the second the food hits the table, seeing it, enjoying the presentation, hopefully serving it even on a nice plate and making it artistically nice and pleasing to the eye, making sure that you are tasting it and feeling the texture and the mouth feel when you're eating it and eating slowly. And hearing any noises that it may make is always fun too, right? ASMR has become such a huge thing out there. I guess there's a reason for that. So there are just so many ways that yoga and plant-based eating become integrated, and it really is in and around different aspects of mindfulness. And lastly, I'll just speak to food becomes such a preoccupation for us, just letting the minds chatter, hook on to this one topic, and we can obsess about it forever. And yoga and meditation is about harnessing the chatter of the mind, whether it's about our to-do list or an argument we've had with our loved one or anything that happens in the daily life. But it's also food. How frequently do you think about food, Christina? I mean, we all think about it to a certain degree. Like we have to plan, and that's okay. Planning is okay, but you just don't want it to get to that point of preoccupation.
And
So
you talk about creating rituals, which is so important. I never thought of it at mealtime to actually do things like that and put on some music. And but I did learn, just to echo your sentiment about letting your senses really activate at mealtime is really important, because scientifically, we sit down to eat, and if we have our phone going and distractions, or you're working and you bring your food to your desk, there are negative elements to that. Scientifically, your olfactory response kicks in when you sit down to eat, right? So if you're thinking about something else on the phone, focused on something else, and the full faculties aren't focused on that banana you're about to eat, your mind might not send through the olfactory response going to the mind to release the enzymes that digest the banana properly. Like there's a whole system going on here that we have to be mindful of. And by practicing those things that you do, the yoga and the mindfulness meditation, you're allowing for that whole system to operate at maximum capacity. And also that speaks to weight loss. One of the things you talk about in the WinWin diet is especially as for someone like me who's entering my 50s, it's really important to be mindful about all those things that you suggest, so that my body isn't adopting things that age will create and cause. And so develop those good habits early on. This is a book for teenagers, 20 somethings. Like, get started on that healthful path and create those good habits early on, and those rituals. And the WinWin diet certainly is that that guideline to doing that. So you talk about this foods that you don't have to worry about, still eat the foods you love in the book. what are some foods to avoid? What are things that your body does not need?
Your body does not need a lot of saturated fat, trans fat, processed sugar, processed foods, chemically derived food, which is basically what processed food is. So you definitely want to limit your consumption of those. I don't like to say never. We're all gonna at some point enjoy something and should, but you don't want to make a habit of it. And so that could be, dessert food. It could be the donuts in the package. It could be the cookies or the cakes, or the frozen waffles, like, or pancakes. That could be the processed meats, the burgers and the sausages, and all that stuff you want to eat as purely and naturally as possible.
And there's so much talk about these trendy diets, especially fast mimicking, fasting. How many hours to be doing that? What is that? All about, and how does that factor into the win-win diet?
Look, intermittent fasting actually can have very beneficial effects. It can reduce obesity, type 2 diabetes. It can definitely help with weight loss, autoimmune disease as well. It's hard to adhere to, though, for many people, and it can have a backlash effect whereby you do it and then you just overcompensate because it's just not comfortable for you. So I think it's great and fine for people who want to give it a try, and they should experiment with the different techniques, whether it's a 14-hour fast at night or a 16-hour fast at night, or if it's a day on, a day off, or 5 days a week consuming your regular calorie consumption and 2 days doing under 500 calories. There's so many different ways of intermittent fasting. So if people are interested in doing that, I'd say experiment. And then again, go through I don't really talk a lot about intermittent fasting in the WinWin diet, but the assessment section definitely can be used as you're going through that process of discovery for yourself, or anything else that's related to diet. So I'd say go back to those questions, ask yourself, am I feeling irritated? Am I famished? Am I angry? Am I actually totally happy and feeling great and content? Am I preoccupied and thinking about food constantly because I'm so hungry? Or, am I liberated and not thinking about it anymore because I don't have to worry about like my next meal? So I think the assessment section is really helpful for people to use if they're gonna try that out.
Now, what would you like your readers to take away from the win-win diet?
Just that there is a way for everyone, and that all that diet culture and all the fad diets out there, there are things that they can offer that you can pick and choose from, but really it comes down to what feels good to you, what you enjoy, what enhances your health and well-being, what works for your family, for your lifestyle, and to just know that you can have an incredibly healthy diet that fulfills all of those categories, and you do not have to deprive yourself or feel guilty. There's so much guilt out there in the world if you do choose to eat any animal products, for instance, or if you do choose to have a cookie at some point. And I'm not like that at all, by the way. I laugh and joke all the time that ice cream is my favorite food. I do prefer and try to eat organic ice cream if I'm going to eat it. But we all have our things, and it's okay, but you just have to learn how to moderate and modify, limit.
That's the key word. Moderation is everything.
Yeah.
If you're doing other things that as you mentioned, other rituals, if you're being mindful, if you're being physically fit, if you're sleeping well, all these things attribute to a healthy gut, a healthy immune system, and will give you that energy that you need. And then you can, and eating well, obviously, is paramount. But then you can, have that dessert or that cookie or what have you, and it will not hurt you in the way
Right.
that if that's all you're doing and you're not doing all those other things, it will.
Exactly. And let's throw in alcohol also, because again, I might be more lenient with having a cookie or some ice cream every now and then, but I'm very strict about alcohol consumption. And so, people might watch what I eat and say, oh, she's normal or whatever, which I'm proud of. I'm glad to be normal. Um, but, I really try to keep my drinking to once a week, like a drink a week. On vacations, I'll definitely like let myself go a little bit more, but I have strong beliefs about alcohol.
Yeah, and we all should. It just it doesn't release all the things that we use it for. It actually just masks them, and so the next day you wake up and everything is still there. So it's very important to be mindful of that as well. So on your website, juliewilcoxwellness.com, can we find the book to order?
You can. There is a link to order the book on Amazon. You can also order it on Barnes and Noble, and you can also get it at your independent bookstores. So you can
What about
support what
Amazon?
you want to support. Huh?
What about Amazon?
Amazon, you can get it. Yes.
So here's the book, The WinWin Diet, and I'm here with Julie Wilcox, and I am so grateful to you for this great book. It's a plan that everyone should get on, with really wonderful tips on how to enter that plant-based world. If you've ever, been thinking about doing it, now's the time. Take this book, use it as your guide. And now I want to open it up to questions from the library audience.
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and we will direct your question. See, we added the Amazon link in there for the book, so that's in there. If anyone also wants to use the raise hand feature, we can also unmute.
What is a natural plant-based sleep aid? Herbal
That's a good
teas.
question.
Yeah, herbal teas would be the one that I would suggest. Chamomile tea, mint tea, ginger. I mean, really, whatever you love. They're all great. Lavender.
Valerian.
That's what I recommend. Explain flexitarianism. So we talked about that a little bit. It's essentially about reducing your meat consumption, and or making choices about quality. It can pertain to meat. It can also pertain to eggs and dairy as well. But the idea is to reduce your consumption of those animal products, or rather than choosing processed variations on them, choosing local pasture raised, grass fed types if you have access to those, organic.
Someone was asking about intermittent fasting, which you did touch on.
Yes. Should we go over that again, or do we think we've covered that?
Julie said she likes intermittent fasting, but it's going to be personalized for for each person. You have to figure out what works best for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't personally intermittent fast, but I do know the research behind it. And there are strong suggestions that there is an association between positive associations between intermittent fasting and disease prevention and weight loss. How many ounces of water do you recommend? It depends on your level of activity. Again, that's a very personalized question. It used to be always 8 cups a day. That research is a bit obsolete. You really need to just hydrate yourself as you feel you need to. When you're thirsty, drink, and just make sure that you're drinking throughout the day. but it really depends on how much you're exercising and what you're doing in your lifestyle, how, how tall you are, what your weight is, all those things make a big difference. So
We have a question. What supplements do you take?
I do not take supplements on a regular basis. I have at times in my life, I was once low in B12. So I took a B12, a shot actually. And you just do one of those and that can correct the issue. And it did for me. I have also at times once been low in iron. So I took iron for a period of time and that's it. I don't take vitamin or mineral supplements on a regular basis. I think I go through, part of what this book is about is being able to be fluid within the different eating patterns. So sometimes I am more vegetarian and vegan than I am pescatarian, even though I am pescatarian because I do eat fish in general. And I think when I'm just like not feeling as into eating fish, then maybe those are the times where I can be lower on those other things. So that's when, I talk about in the book, you really need to be eating more seeds like flax seeds and chia seeds, getting your omega-3s from plant sources, healthy oils and fats instead of relying on the fish and the meat and the dairy and the egg products. We have another on plant-based cleanses. I've never been a huge fan of cleanses. Again, I think that they can work. I think research is mixed on them. It's something you can try, but I really believe that the best approach is to just be consistent, not ever eat too much, not ever eat too little, but eat consistently and regularly, healthy foods, clean foods that are pure. And that's the best way to go. A cleanse every now and then is great and fine. Some people like to do it regularly and they love it, and that's great if it works for them. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's wonderful if you want to try it and it works for you, but I don't think it's necessary. And I don't think it's the answer to weight loss either. I think much research definitely has shown that, doing extreme techniques like cleansing for the purpose of weight loss tends to backfire and you regain the weight.
Yeah, can I just echo that? My favorite idea of a cleanse is when you need to reset your body because you've been eating too much sugar, or you've been drinking too much, or you're going in a wrong direction. Then it's good to reset your whole system and practice healthier eating. That is the cleanse that I would suggest, like the one you recommend in the book, to actually go into this plant-based eating diet. It's really the smartest thing you can do for your health and longevity.
Yeah, to the point of longevity, by the way, I just wanted to say that 80% of our genes are expressed and determined by our lifestyle as opposed to just inherent biological processes. And so that's how important it is to really get the right foods. Really only 20% of it is innate. So what we're doing to ourselves matters a whole lot. What else do we have?
We have a question from Rosemary. Do you juice or make green smoothies?
I don't juice or make green smoothies, but I do have my morning antioxidant smoothie, which is in the book almost every single morning. And that is made of frozen banana, frozen strawberries, frozen blueberries, a tablespoon of almond butter, some coconut water, a couple tablespoons of almond milk, and a quarter of a teaspoon of maple syrup. And it is delicious. And sometimes I top it with my homemade granola, which is also in the book, or I'll eat it on the side. Like I'll have something else on the side, whether it's an egg dish. There's like a hard-boiled egg with pesto, for instance, in the book, with a homemade pesto, which is delicious, or like one of my vegan corn muffins, or a slice of the whole wheat zucchini bread. So if I'm just having this smoothie on its own without the granola on top, I'll couple it with something else. If I have the granola on top, that's more of a meal, and I'm satiated by that. But otherwise, I don't juice. Do you juice, Cristina?
So I was just going to say, I do juice. I have a great juicer, this Nama juicer, and I love it. It's very efficient and easy to clean and quiet. And I got this juicer and I became obsessed with the juicer. But I don't juice every day. I will make a celery and lemon juice because I found that when I was treating my Epstein-Barr, and all the research I had done, nutritionists I had discussed it with, they felt like I needed to do something like that on a daily basis. So I do that like every third day. I'll get a juice that has, spinach, celery, lemon, sometimes kale. I tend to migrate away from the cucumbers and the zucchinis because of the water content, and my chemistry doesn't really complement the more water-based vegetables, even though there are so many. But I really took a deep dive into my health when I had Lyme disease. And I did that epigenetics DNA test, and I determined, I was like, do I really need to eat kale all the time? Like, just because everybody is, like, I really looked into these things to see what was working for me. So yes, I juice infrequently, not all the time.
See, you're the perfect example of someone who, you never know what people have and are dealing with. You've had Lyme disease at one point, you have Epstein-Barr, like, we just don't know. And each of these things matters a lot and certainly will determine what you should and shouldn't be eating and doing as far as diet is concerned.
That's what I love about this book, because you do explain the need for personalization, and you cover foods in such a holistic and healthy way, the way you should be looking at foods. Like, unless you're really allergic to something, you can eat it if it's coming from the right place, whether it's local or it's organic or what have you. But the premise of learning as much as you can and being your own best nutritionist is key here. And you give us the tools to do that, which I really like.
Thank you. About following us on social media, you certainly can. We're both on Instagram. I'm at Julie Wilcox Wellness. And Cristina, yours is it just Cristina Cuomo? I follow you.
It's at Cristina Cuomo, no H in my name. It's Cristina, CR.
That's a tough one, no H.
My mom's Brazilian and my dad's German, so I guess that's how they spell it in those countries. But that's my cross to bear. And then, and also at the Purist, where we offer suggestions like the ones in your book, and we will direct people to practitioners like yourself to learn from. So it's at the Purist and at Cristina Cuomo and at Julie Wilcox Wellness.
Yes. Do we have any other questions?
What do you think of the idea of frequent meals rather than 3 meals a day?
I'm not a fan of that. 2 to 3 meals a day has shown to be the healthiest way to go. Eating more frequently throughout the day keeps insulin levels elevated, and that is a big problem for our systems, and is one of the driving reasons for the obesity epidemic and type 2 diabetes. Just elevated blood glucose levels, which then also, if you have high insulin or elevated insulin, frequent amount of time during each day, it tends to then have the glucose be stored as fat instead of going to the muscles to be used for fuel to energize you. So yeah, I mean, it's best to go with 2 to 3 meals per day.
Snacking is tough, especially with this transition during COVID to being at home so much.
Yeah.
You want to have
Yeah,
access to snacks.
right. You just want to keep them out of sight and only have the good ones in the house. I mean, definitely studies have shown that it makes a huge difference as to, again, like we talked about the senses and how important they are. When you have stuff out and present, I mean, it drives cravings. You're much more likely to eat it. So you want to have your environment be conducive to your goals. 50% carbs, 40% fat, 10% protein per meal. That sounds pretty balanced. That sounds good. Again, it would depend on the individual, but if that's working for you, it's in the ranges for each of the macronutrients. So that's great. We have a question about being in ketosis. Again, the ketogenic diet can be great for certain individuals. It originally came about for people with epilepsy and was really helpful to that. It's also very good for people that are suffering with different types of brain cancers and tumors. So those are some of the early reasons that ketogenic diets came about. It can be helpful for weight loss, but again, hard to stick to for a lot of people. And just a challenge just in terms of lifestyle and getting the proportions right and really doing it the way that it's meant to be done to actually get the benefits of it and have it be something that's sustainable. So those are my thoughts on it.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Do we have any other questions?
I think there was
That's
one
it.
final one on ketosis, being in a state of ketosis as a way of being healthy. What do you think about that, Julie?
Yeah, no, I just answered that. I think you were just sneezing as I started to answer it. But I think it's okay for certain people. But again, it's difficult to adhere to, so not for everyone. Anything else?
I don't see any more.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for zooming in this evening to tonight's presentation through the East Hampton Library. And I'd also like to thank Julie Wilcox and Cristina Cuomo for being with us tonight. And we wish you all the best with the book. And we look forward to more materials coming out. And we hope everybody has a great evening and week ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much for having us. And thank you, Cristina.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, everyone, for including me in this wonderful conversation about this book. Everyone should order it. WinWin Diet.
Have a great evening.
You too.